Welcome to Secured with Dr. KJ, the podcast where we break down cybersecurity, the technologies driving it, and the companies shaping our digital future. I'm your host, Dr. Kenneth Johnson, cybersecurity leader, technologist, and strategist. Cybersecurity isn't just an IT concern, it's a business imperative. Each episode, we'll explore key topics like cloud security, zero trust, AI-driven defense, and more. We'll assess how tech leaders are adapting, where they need to improve, and what it takes to stay ahead of evolving threats. This podcast features expert insights from security professionals, industry leaders, and technologists, offering real-world solutions to modern cybersecurity challenges. Whether you're a business leader, security expert, or just curious about how technology keeps us safe, this podcast is for you. Subscribe and join the conversation as we explore cybersecurity's biggest challenges, securing tomorrow, one episode at a time. Today's guest is a legend in software performance and a longtime advocate for diversity in tech. He brings a unique blend of deep technical expertise and a heartfelt social impact to the conversation. Rico Mariani began his Microsoft journey in 1988 after graduating from the University of Waterloo. He's known as the perf guy. Rico's spent nearly 30 years at Microsoft in key roles, from debugger lead and chief architect for Visual Studio 2010 to leading performance and reliability for Microsoft Edge. He is currently the vice president and architect for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, helping shape the future of endpoint security at scale. Beyond his technical contributions, Rico has championed diversity and equity in tech, mentoring women in computer science and creating scholarships for Black and Indigenous students at his alma mater. It is an honor to have him on the show. Rico, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, and hopefully I can be a little informative and a little entertaining for you today.
I love it. I love it. Based on our interaction before, I think we're going to be perfectly fine. So I love it. And thank you for truly joining the show. But I want to ask you the quick question. Give me the story behind you being the perf guy. I
mean, it's kind of an accident. A lot of things are an accident. Me owning the debugger in developer division for a while was also an accident. But I started doing performance work in any serious kind of way while I was at school, and I was working on my Othello program and for a contest, and I started doing tracing and looking at where the time was going, trying to make my Othello program faster. And that taught me kind of the basics. And then they gave me this thing when I started, and it was kind of slow. And they're like, "Well, do you know how to performance tune stuff?" I'm like, "Well, I guess I did it before. I mean, it must be kind of sort of, I don't know. I guess so, yeah." And so they're like, "Okay, do it." And so I did it, and I got better. And they're like, "Well, that was pretty good." And then the next thing come along, "Well, ask Rico. He knows how to do it." It's like, I asked Mikey, he won't say no. And so it just kept happening, and I kept doing one thing after another. And pretty soon I had done a little of this, a little of that, some server stuff, and before you know it, I was kind of good at it. And I don't know how it happened.
I love it.
I didn't mean to eat the whole pizza. It's just it's gone now. And so I ended up doing it it's the thing I've done the most in my career. And I never planned it. The debugger, working on the debugger was the same kind of thing. I found a performance problem in the debugger. And I was like, well, how hard could it be? I'm sure I can fix this one thing. And so I opened it up and made this little change. I found it very straightforward. I made a change. A few weeks later, they're looking for someone to run the debugger. Rico's worked on the debugger. Let's give it to him. I'm like, well, I fixed this one thing that I don't know anything. Oh, you're in. Okay.
That's right.
And so I ended up owning the debugger. A lot of the stuff, it just happens by accident. And then one thing leads to another. Before you know it, you're the perf guy. I don't know. It is what it is.
So what you're telling everybody is be curious, be focused, and be curious on what you're going for. I love it.
Have fun with it. I did it. I just kind of landed in it, and expect the unexpected.
No, well, I appreciate that backstory there, Rico. That's an amazing story. So let's switch gears a little bit to everybody's favorite topic, security. and we're focused on the hybrid workforce here. But I want to know, like, what are some of your biggest security challenges that you're seeing with organizations in a hybrid work environment today?
It's like all the usual problems, but it's, now I'm going to quote Family Feud. I love quoting TV shows and stuff, by the way. So it's like dollar values are doubled, right? It's
Okay.
like all the usual problems, but times two, right?
Right.
So, like for me, everything begins with trying to understand the inventory. It's all about inventory first. What do I even got, in my estate? And then once you know what you got, then okay, what's my posture? Okay, like what vulnerabilities am I looking at? What software are they running? And that's just basic stuff, right? Like everything starts from there, and so everything becomes more complicated when it's hybrid, right? Because maybe you can't just scan the network. You have to get them when they log on. You have to find ways to get an accurate inventory. Do you onboard them? What if they don't want to onboard? So what's your answer for that? Do you not allow it?
Right.
Do you do like some other kind of strategy? There could be malware on the devices. You can't count on the users to necessarily be as clean as you might be in the corporate environment. Maybe you can't patch their devices automatically, so maybe you can detect. Or maybe you have no strategy at all there. You have to live with the malware because you can't remediate. So then what do you do? Well, you start reaching for the assume breach, assume zero trust, and so what do I do there? Well, I limit the access, and I'm like, okay, well, you have to go through these gateways, and so the security comes from the fact that I come through the portal. Okay. Maybe you do like a bunch of RBAC stuff. So you're like, well, let me do least privilege. So if the device is compromised, it can only do very little. Let me make sure that I have good ability to evict a particular device in the event that I find it's a problem. Maybe I take advantage of my EDR for post-breach and an active pre-breach even, kind of make sure that everything looks copacetic and I'm not seeing strange activity at my portal. Maybe VPN is a part of my answer, and right. I like getting on board with the VPN, and maybe I insist on biometrics or I insist on MFA. But you see how it's all turning into like it's right. That playbook all over again, and it just becomes sort of doubly important, right. To be thinking about it in the hybrid context because you don't know what they might be bringing. You get other lovely problems, like maybe they're running their custom router. Okay.
Yeah.
And like, what's that all about?
All the operating systems and right. whatnot, what patches, vulnerability management, all of those things.
So it's potentially everything between them and you right. that might be a problem because you can't assume that they're running, a highly trusted network stack and that there aren't additional devices, like for all someone's going to a public library right. and plugging in and who knows who's listening to what. So what do you do about that? Do you limit the environments? But like maybe that's important. Maybe you have people who are like salesmen and they're roaming all over the country and they need to plug right. in somewhere. And you need an answer for that. So it's a lot of the same kinds of problems. Mm-hmm. But like I tend to, think about it in terms of what are the basics, right? The basics, like what's my inventory? What's my posture? Right. The simplest things like what software is on that box, do I have known vulnerabilities in their OS? Like, is their device readily compromisable? Okay. And then they're not in the corporate environment, right? So what about social, right? We didn't even talk about social yet. What about social? Like, they probably need training to make sure that they understand what socially engineered attacks look like. And if you think someone might be going after them specifically, the fact that they might be sitting, in an internet cafe or whatever to make their connection, it just makes them that much more vulnerable because their guard might be down. And so information exfiltration could happen in lots of different ways. You probably want something to help with devices and device-based exfiltration. People do wonky stuff. Like they think it's safe to put a USB thing into their computer, and they just put any old USB that they find. They get it. They find a lost dongle in a hotel, plug it in. Who knows what happens, right? So, and you don't know what that might be. So
Wow.
there's a number of things that are just a little bit different because maybe they're just a little bit more relaxed because they're not like at corporate.
Right.
They didn't badge in and stuff, and they're feeling like it's perfectly safe. But you can find malware on a USB stick anywhere.
Correct.
Somebody could have left it on purpose or accidentally. At some bar, you picked it up and you're like, oh, I need some storage. I'll just use this.
Agreed.
And simple stuff like this happens, right? So, the thing is, it's mostly safe, right? Like,
right.
This mostly doesn't happen. Mostly it's fine. Mostly the patches are mostly good. It's, so punctuated by sometimes not, right? And it's going to be one of these things that bites you. But for me, it comes down to the basics again. It's always coming back down to like, what's my inventory? What's my posture? What do I know about these devices? What
are the risks you want to accept within your environment and so forth? Right.
And then I have to decide, and how much I want to lock that down, and how much access they have.
So as you talk about coming back to the basics, what does that look like for an organization taking on this new journey, coming to the cloud, right? And still working in hybrid environment? Because my quick thoughts are, you're not going to move everything tomorrow to the cloud. And so it's going to be in steps. And so what are some of the things that you think about from just a getting started position for a company?
I think probably the most important thing you can do is get your home in order first. We started by talking about hybrid, but we were talking about it as an adjunct to a system that was already kind of working.
Correct.
Like if you don't know anything about inventory in the first place, hybrid inventory. I don't have any inventory. Okay.
Agreed.
So I think the first step is getting inside your own four walls under control, if you like, okay? And getting a sense of what the risks are and being deliberate about what the policy is going to be for outside. What do your people need to do? I think that's another important part of the journey, like understanding who are these people that are working hybrid and what are they doing? And the solution is very different. Like, suppose the hybrid people are engineers, okay? Well, they need source code access. They're going to need to do huge synchronizations. They might be moving multiple gigabytes of data just to sync, and or they could be doing art workflow and doing video uploads and streaming. So, like, those people have very different needs, than say maybe a salesperson or a traveling doctor. A traveling doctor maybe has like a single workflow tool that they use to do the bulk of their work. It has very specific protocols. It can be well secured. It might be on a specific tablet that's maybe company issued, and that's maybe like the cleanest situation, right? You have a specific device, specifically issued. It gets patched. Maybe they bring it in once every couple months. You give them you rotate them a new one so they don't have to wait around, and they get a nice patch device or whatever. Right. It could be anything like that. But that developer case, when I worked at Meta, I was working at home all through COVID, 100%. Right. And I was hybrid other times too because it was convenient. There are lots of times where some incident would come up. I'd be at home. I don't do that so much here at Microsoft. Right. I live really close to the corporate, so it's usually I just drive here. It's easier, right? Rather than try to set up an environment at home. But okay, not everyone lives a few minutes from work. Right. But at Meta, okay, I was doing full blown engineering at my house. Okay. And so, like, I need to be able to run test tools. I have, like, apps that are opening random ports for communication, data synchronization tests. I have phone emulators. And, so, like, that's a tough one, right? Because there's a ton of stuff that needs to work, for a developer to be productive. And they might prefer that the development's not even local in that scenario. Like maybe it's better if you have a VM you're connecting to, and then like your local connection is all I remote to this VM, and the VM's basically on-prem again, right? And actually, a lot of work could happen that way, but not everything. A lot of stuff had to happen local. Like I had a phone that I was testing on, like the phone is, it's like in my hand, I have to test on the phone, and so somehow I have to get bits to the phone. That's a very complicated one. So it becomes very important to understand what are my clients doing, like who am I supporting in the context of this operation? What do they need? And how can I make that, as pleasant for them as possible and put the right kind of constraints on them, and investing in infra, like you don't want to spend your time investing in the kind of infra that you need if you want to support remote engineers, when all you really need is a couple of remote applications and a good app gateway, right? And but you're not going to know that until you understand, and even if your hybrid workforce is itself hybrid, you might have one or two engineers out there. Okay, so fine. They need, this big solution, but maybe the vast majority of your people can be something much simpler. Wow. This is always better again, right? This is just good operations. Don't complicate everything just because a couple of people need something complicated, and you can substantially limit your risk. And then maybe the engineers with all this flexibility, they get extra training, they get the full court press on social engineering and, trustworthy computing and all the things, right? And so you make them go through to understand what's going on. And, it's an engineer, fine. You can teach them about the issues associated with plugging in random USB drives, and they'll get it. For other people, maybe you just pick a device that doesn't have USB ports.
Right, right.
You disable the USB ports. And you're like, it's just done. You don't need them. It's fine. You can do your job. You don't need this stuff at all. You need this one kind of connection and one gateway, very straightforward. And then your inventory problems become easier as well. The management problems become easier.
Agreed. No, I agree. I hate getting on VPN to access some of my reports, but I understand the meaning behind it and why we have the security that we have. And it just makes a lot of sense. And so as you brought up something around the endpoints, right? You were talking about your phone, and how should clients, customers, how should they really look at that BYOD, bring your own device, and having them work in that hybrid? What are the vulnerabilities associated with seeing that across that distributed environment? Like that, to me, is a huge entry point for any threat actor to come in and do some damage.
Sure. Yeah, it can be anything. Like, okay. It's usually not, right? It's mostly not. It's mostly fine. It's mostly not a problem. Punctuated by, oh crap. So, let me rock your world for a second. Let's say all I get to do is compromise your printer, okay? Which you didn't even think about.
Right.
What can I do if I own your printer? Okay. I could be doing all kinds of stuff. You send documents to your printer, you just print stuff. I'm like, they surreptitiously go to the cloud. Lots of printers are Wi-Fi connected.
Access the cache, right?
And this is just BYOD. It's like, it's not even my thing. It's just my printer. It's local Wi-Fi printer or whatever, just print. It's fine. Okay, so in principle, the whole thing could be a total catastrophe, right? But it's probably not. And so there's stuff you can do there. Again, you want to make sure you have the right data exfiltration kinds of protections. But you would do that on your corporate network also, right? You don't want people just printing random stuff. Some stuff is secured. So you want to have that. And the local device, especially if it's BYOD, you know less about it, and you probably have less ability to configure it. But there are solutions there. You can be okay, you have your device, but it's all it's doing is running a facade to an app, right? So it's thin client, or it's VPN or something like that. So all the data is over there, and you're just looking at it, and your device is just a screen, right? And that kind of plays well too, because now you can't take those docs and print them, because you don't really have them. They're all over there.
Right.
So the less control you have over the device, sort of the more you want to be thinking about from an infrastructure perspective, what am I doing to make it so that that device is as safe as possible? I have to assume the device is compromised, right? Like the best thing to do is assume they're connecting with a compromised device and go from there. What would I do if I knew the device was compromised? It's probably not. It's mostly fine, but best to assume. Okay, so starting from that zero trust perspective, you're like, okay, well, I can help, by doing MTA for logins. I can help by limiting access. I can help by using app facades. I feel like I'm playing the same toolkit again, though, right? Is this sounding like a broken record? Limited permissions, least privileged access, and fitting the access to the need, right? So, ensuring that you have an experience that's appropriate for each of the different roles that you have is going to go a long way to letting you enable more devices with less control over that device. A lot of times, you don't need to give them like robust access to everything on your corporate campus. They need to deliver results, or it's a doctor reporting in. They have to be able to enter their conclusions and do their reporting, right? Maybe they're going from patient to patient and using a tablet of their own. That's fine. When they log in with that tablet, they're connecting to an app gateway and they have comparatively little access to anything other than their own records. And maybe they only have limited editing abilities while they're on the road like that. They can add new stuff. They can append to the log. They can't delete. They can't, you see, and I'm picking on the doctor example, but it could be anything, right? It could be a building inspector going door to door, checking out different buildings and reporting different stuff, which could include very sensitive data, right? For lots of reasons. Maybe it's financially sensitive, maybe it's security sensitive, maybe it's infrastructure sensitive. There's all kinds of reasons. But you could tailor an experience for that person and give them something that lets them do their job and gives them just the access they need. And so the less control you have over the device, the more control you kind of want over the data flow and what the access is, so that you can have effective permissions. And then you need to know what's going on there. But it's going to be hard. Sometimes you're just not going to know what's up with like the rest of their network infrastructure, for instance, right? Like, how will you know about that compromised printer? It's like could be impossible for you to run an IoT scan from their BYOD phone. And even if you could somehow by downloading extra software or something, they might not be very happy about it,
Right.
But they might be okay with saying, hey, if you want to connect, you have to be running Defender on your phone. Okay, we have this minbar. And this is a negotiation you're going to have with your executives, and your CISO will have something to say about it. And then what the roles are and what the expectations of that roles are, what that role is. Let me give you one more example. I feel like I'm running off at the mouth, but let's say I'm a newspaper, okay? And I have a bunch of freelance photographers, and they send me pictures with their devices. I'm going to control their devices? I don't think so, right?
No.
No freelance photographer is going to be like, yes, I'll install Defender for you.
Exactly.
That relationship is very arm's length, right? And this is a very, any kind of freelance contribution like that. Okay, so how do you solve that? You make a gateway. They can connect and upload their pictures, and that's all they can do. They can upload all their pictures. They can log in, and they can then arrange for payment. You'll know what they owe them, and you have some way of getting. But it's an experience tailored to that photographer. And now you don't need to know very much about their phone at all, or whatever, their tablet. It doesn't matter. You don't care. They uploaded their phone, their photo, they're done. That part of your relationship is very clear, and you have a nice, straightforward interaction with them. So you don't have to trust very much. If it's an engineer, life is more complicated, right? They got access to your source code. They're doing, so everything now is much more complicated. So there's kind of, extremes of access that you might need. You can't see, but I have my hands very far apart now. A very close relationship for the photographer, and very big, wide, complicated relationship for the engineer. So tailoring the relationships, and then plugging that into your usual toolkit, I think that gets you a long way.
This wraps up another powerful episode of Secured with Dr. KJ. A huge thank you to Rico Mariani for joining us and sharing his insights on software performance, inclusive innovation, and how we adapt to rapidly evolving hybrid workforce. His decades of experience and continued commitment to mentoring and advocating remind us that great technology is built not just with code, but with intention, collaboration, and purpose. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your network. Until next time, we're securing tomorrow, one episode at a time.